Okay, so part one we left off. Let's go ahead and look at this here. We have the basic mechanics of the walk going on, right? We've got a little bit of side to side in the hips, up and down with the upper body. Well, in this case, the upper body, the body itself, that's lower body, and some basic walking going on. So we need to go back to our. Oh, where did I put that? There we go. So we've done the contact and we've done this pass, right? The whole idea that it's starting to raise itself up as it's bringing this foot, dragging like basically one leg behind, and getting ready to plant it down on the ground, right? So we'll just work our way through these poses. So let's go ahead and almost look at it here. I think it'll be easier to see. So what happens is as the foot comes forward, right, it's going to land in this contact position, and then just a couple frames after this, it's going to come down a little bit, catch itself. We'll put this one right here. We're going to pull all that roll out of it, and the foot. Okay, and let's just call that good for now. Just see if we got everything there. And the reason I did it here instead of the beginning is just we could see the body coming down and catching itself right here at 14. And then as it comes up, let's go ahead and go to this one. Let's do it at 21. And here, the example talks about, let's go back to that. So the high point, so this is a little exaggerated. This is a little more cartoony. Usually when I do this example, I don't get this detailed, I guess, or, well, I guess exaggerated. Maybe that's the better word. I don't get this exaggerated, but since this example I brought up, we'll go ahead and do that. And I guess the point I want to make is they're basic fundamentals, but there's also lots of different ways that we can approach this, right? So let's pull this one here. Let's go ahead and put this foot up nice and high, and I'll just hit. So you can see here on this one, maybe, in fact, let's look at the graph editor. So let's do a little bit of adjusting. So the problem here is that the height of that is about the same, right? And what I want is this to come down into, let's make this the view. So the recoil is this lower one, and then as we get to the passing pose, it starts to come up, and then we get this height, this high pose. So I'm going to stretch this up. You can see it's stretching off the ground. In this case, what I'm going to do is go ahead and put more roll into that foot there. And let's pull it down just a little bit. All right. So I'm going to set the whole walker, and let's see what we get. Right, so it starts to come down for this last one. Let's go ahead and look at this. Right, so it certainly has a hitch in it because of the flow that's going on here. We need to add these new keys. Let's go back over to this. All right, so this one here at 3 is going to be our recoil. So let's go ahead and put this back down to 0 and that to 0. Let's pull the body down a little bit. And I'll just go ahead and hit S. Right, and we don't have a high pose here. We'll do it at 9. let's see here. This one maybe should be a 5. I might change that here in a little bit. And I'm going to stretch that all the way up, and I'm going to do the roll. And let's look at the reference again. So you can see they have that foot almost cocked back here, like really propped, I guess. So let's... At this point, I'm going to put the toe kind of flat like this. Let's look at this translate. So you can see how high the pose is there on that one. I'm going to make sure this... Let's go back into this. Okay, so it's got a nice hop to it, and the feet are kind of planting. So the nice thing about the high pose is that it puts the foot up here pretty high and then brings it down, quickly to the ground and kind of plants it. We need to do some detailing on that to make it work, right? But it does bring up one issue here. In fact, let's look at it from a couple different angles. A couple things that are going on. What are we doing on time? Okay, 6 minutes, perfect. So, one thing is that as it comes down here in the middle, you can see it comes in a nice trough, right? And then it flows back up to this peak, and then this comes down, and it's one frame off, it goes to 24, but it starts to slow down here, and then go back into that. So think of this as like an oscillation, like a wave, right? So this is a peak, and it comes down in the valley, and this is a peak, and then it comes down, but you can see here it kind of flattens out. This frame here really should be this one. So really this should curve into it. And what's happening is because this is the very first frame and the last frame, and there are no keyframes in the negative side or on the positive after 24, Maya is just treating this as a flat tangent curve. But really what should be happening is it should be flowing down to meet this one. Does this make sense? So let me show you a way to, two different ways we could address this. We could turn it to linear, which will point that in the direction where the tangent is coming from. It can work okay. What I like to do actually is if I hold down shift, and so I'll select this first frame, and then I'm going to hold down shift and draw a little marquee to get this tangent. And I'll hold down shift, and then I'll get the corresponding tangent on this other side, right? So now if I have the move tool active and I click, you can see that they're now moving with each other with the idea that I'm going to make the tangents similar to each other. And they should basically flow into, one flows into the other. Let's pull that one down a little bit here. That one's kind of flat. It's a flat tangent. Okay, so let's see what we get. Right? So it takes that little hiccup out of the translation, or the transition, I should say, between the two of these, right? So it smoothly keeps on coming down to this one. Maybe that's too much. Maybe we'll just torque that a little bit. Right, so it doesn't bottom out too much there. And then it makes this, and it makes that translation. Okay? So actually, that's looking pretty good. Okay. The other thing, I said there were two problems, at least the way I look at this. Is not too bad. In general, there's a couple problems with this. The biggest that I find is, we've been animating from the side to make sure that we get this whole rhythm working correctly. And so far, that's pretty good, I think, right? There's a nice bounce to it. It's doing its thing. One thing I don't like, though, when I go to the front view is that it's very straightforward, right? These feet are just working, and they're directly, straight down from the body. That's okay. But I think there's some things that we could do. The first thing is maybe what we could do is select the foot control itself. And if we look at its translate, I'm going to zoom out a little bit. Just keep in mind, because there's really no keyframes on there. Right now it's using really small values. Right, so what I'm going to do is zoom out, and I'm going to look at this where it's on the ground. Right, so I'm going to move those keyframes down. I know you can barely even see them. Right, they're starting to get some value on them, right? So we already set the keys. So now what I'm doing is just selecting all of them and moving down. I don't want to get rid of them, because what I might want to do is like maybe move the foot out at a certain place, like maybe as it comes off the ground here. Right, you can see it's just kind of stepping out away from itself like this. You could even put a keyframe on it with the one of the rotation values. Let's say the Y here. It's a pretty small value. Oops, not the translate. I want the rotate Y. Right, I might just have to keyframe those instead of dragging them, right? So what I might do is let's turn it in like this. I'm going to have to make some changes here in a second to that, but I'll put a keyframe there. This is going to look a little awkward. I'm trying to massage out some different things, but you can see the main thing is I'm adding a little bit of flip to that foot, so it isn't just always perfectly flat. You could do the same thing, on the using one of the twist controls. Let's do the ball, and that probably has a bunch of keyframes on it. So let's just see what those values are. There it is. So you can see how the foot itself isn't perfectly straightforward, right? I'm just putting a little bit of twist into it, and also I'm blending that a little bit with the rotate. Now, a word of caution is don't use this rotate when you have the foot on the ground. Just make those zero, and it'll be easier to deal with how the foot roll itself happens. I saw one student that was using a little bit of roll along with the rotation. In essence, she had to keyframe, the different values to kind of balance each other out. Okay, so it's got a lively little walk going on here. The other thing too, if I had animated this so that the let's look at this pose right here. Right, so here you can see that the body is not leaning over the foot a little bit. It looks unbalanced, right? If we look straight down that line, so we could come to this point and maybe put a keyframe here on the body so it's leaning over. In fact, I'll just go back to that's the X value. So let's go up and look at this. So you can see how it's moving side to side. Let's pull this one. Really get to the point where maybe what we do is pull that one up. And the same thing here, these are flat, but really they need to flow from one to the other. See how the body's now walking side to side a little bit to balance itself over the foot? So that's not bad. I'm going to go ahead and select this one and go ahead and put that same, where's that? Put the foot roll on there. What was it? Ball twist. Okay, not too severe, right? So it's going side to side. It's got a little change in the hips. If we wanted to, we could get to the point where we could animate this rotating. A little side to side here. Let's go ahead and look at that. A couple different schools of thought here, but I like the idea that, just because the weight and how this sits on here, this one comes up higher and this one's going to sag a little bit lower. And this one's probably same thing. Now what I'm going to do is just blend those. It's basically just kind of almost like a sine wave in between the two of them. If you hear any meowing, my cat has entered the room. God help us. Oops, a little hard to do frame. Let's get that one, and we'll get that one. We'll kind of blend those. All right, can you see how that's getting a little livelier? Everything's not as robotic. The hips feel alive, like there's some actual locomotion going on there, right? So, boy, 16 minutes. I did a lot of keyframing there. Hopefully that made sense. I just wanted to, part of that's just as I'm animating, being in the flow. The main thing to keep in mind in this part is, again, just breaking it down with the poses, the high point and the recoil in between the other poses that we've done, and then start adding a little changes to it, right? We're trying to make sure that it doesn't just move perfectly straight forward. We want the body to move up and down, twist side to side, translate side to side, and we don't want the feet to be perfect as they come forward. I need to do like lots of little tweaks, I think, here on what their feet are doing. I'd like this to actually, maybe this one here, to flare out or something like that. And you can see I'm going to have to animate the target to kind of fix where that knee is. Right? But I want to do some different things with that so it has a little attitude. Let's go ahead and key those. Let's key that one. Right, so I'm just making sure at times I'm only keyframing just little parts that are inside here without setting a key for the whole entire thing. Like as I look at these values, let's pull that a little bit. Same thing here. Right, and these are just general changes that I'm making. I would probably need to go back and refine those a little bit more. Right, so not bad. Some good stuff going on. All right, this will be the end of part 2, and I'll come back with part 3 and just try to finalize and finesse a few things.